A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man replied, "Master, I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go on your way, your faith has saved you." And immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. My sisters and brothers, the Gospel of the Lord. In the New Testament, we're called to two strong emotions in our following of Christ. We're called to many others, but there are two ones that the writers come back to again and again. We're called to be people of peace and people of joy. They're the two big virtues that are used again and again. Peaceful people, joyful people. And our first reading and our psalm are all about being people of joy, rejoicing. Pope Francis, in his very first letter to the entire church and indeed to the world, called it the joy of the gospel, of being people who have heard the good news and are prepared to proclaim it and live it. And in 2018, in preparation for the Synod for Young People at the Vatican, the Australian Catholic bishops did a survey of young people aged 15 to 30, and they asked them, "What are you most looking for when you come to Mass on Sunday? What are young people looking for if they came here right now with us?" There were 5 big responses, but number 3 was a welcoming, inclusive, and joyful community. They're looking for us to be joyful people. If you're a happy Catholic, can you please tell your face about it sometime soon? Catholics are some of the gloomiest people I have ever met in my life. Apparently, we have the good news. Jesus has now broken the chains of death and we are rising with Christ. But we're not telling anybody about it, and we're certainly not going to smile. Now, I know this is not true in St Patrick's Cathedral parish, but in my parish of North Sydney, I know it's true, because our greeter, after they welcome us to the traditional land and we pay our respects to the elders, they go on to welcome everyone to the church and then encourage everybody to turn to those around them and welcome them, especially any visitors that we might have, any new people, any young people indeed. So sometimes our greeter forgets to do that. So at the beginning of Mass, I do it, and I see this. The first 2/3 of the church happily turn to one another and, at least perfunctorily, greet one another and seem to smile. The back third of the church look at me as though much to say, "I don't do any of this rubbish. You've got 45 minutes and I'm out of here. Get on with it." And I've always wondered if a 20-year-old is sitting or standing next to the person who won't even greet them and certainly doesn't smile, and then the following week they go to Hillsong, where guess what? They're going to be greeted like there's no tomorrow and everyone looks pretty happy to be there. I wonder which place they're going back to on week 3. It isn't rocket science, is it? Why would you turn up to worship with a bunch of grumps who don't seem to be very happy or excited or engaged by the very thing they say is our salvation in this world and in the next. Some people, of course, don't know that they don't smile. They think they smile, but actually they don't. And how I know that is, some of you may know that what part of my ministry has been going around to give in-services and workshops and lectures with Catholic teachers in our Catholic schools. And I'll make up a place and an occasion now, but the event happened. Let's say in Adelaide, for argument's sake, I was brought in to give a big in-service to 3 secondary schools. And we were at the University of Adelaide, and it was a raked theatre, so I could see everybody in a horseshoe shape. And everyone seemed to be enjoying the day. There were about 250 teachers there. That is everyone but one woman. There was a woman right in my eye line who looked as though this was the last place she wanted to be at all. And even though people seemed to be laughing and engaged and seemed to be enjoying the day, she looked as though much to say as, "I hate these days and I hate you. Hurry up, let's get this over and done with. We've got to do this stuff." And that's now, I have no idea what's going on in her life. Her marriage could be falling apart. She could have a sick child. She could have a bad diagnosis herself. Who knows what she brought into that room that day? But she didn't seem engaged at all. At the end of the day, at 3 o'clock, up got the principal of the school who'd invited me in, and he said, "I'd now like to invite the deputy principal of one of the other schools to give Father Leonard the vote of thanks. I'd like to invite Denise to come to the lectern." And this woman got up. And I thought, oh, this is going to be good. And she got up and she said, "Father Leonard, I have been teaching in Catholic schools for 28 years. I have been doing these in-service days for all of that time. I've laughed, I've cried, I've been so engaged, I've loved every little bit of the day. Thank you so much." I want to go back to the microphone and say, "Denise, I want to say one of two things. Firstly, Denise, you are the most sincere and convincing liar I have ever met in my life." Alternatively, I wanted to say, "Denise, if any of that's going on the inside, honey, I got to give you some feedback. You're not communicating that. You didn't smile once as far as I could work out. So apparently you've had a terrific day, but you're the only person who actually knows it." And we do need to be careful about this, because when I started out teaching at St Ignatius College, Riverview in Sydney, the old Jesuit schoolmasters who'd been there for 40 years gave me a terrific piece of advice. They said, "Don't smile before Easter." By that they meant hold on to the reins of the class, relax as the year goes on, but be a bit tough early on getting those boundaries clear of the discipline in the classroom. The problem was for St Saviour's, St Joseph's and St Mary's in this city where I was educated, the teachers were told, "Don't smile before Christmas." And they didn't either, I can assure you. So some of us need to tell our face that we can smile. And furthermore, I think for us to rejoice, some people can let God save the world and we can help out. Some Catholics don't look terribly happy ever to be here and celebrate any sacrament because they tend to be weighed down by the salvation of the world and of their family and friends. Let's get clear. Christ saves the world. We help out. You and I are not the Messiah. We are people who are helping proclaim the Messiah's salvation. And if St. Paul and indeed Jeremiah are to be believed, joy is meant to be one of the great things that animates us. So I'm not talking about walking around this week with a supercilious smile on your face as though you don't have a care in the world. That's a pathology that needs therapy. I'm talking about the fact that we know where we've come from, why we're here, and where we're going. That's the good news. That's why we rejoice. That's why we should be easily able to smile, even if once upon a time in this very cathedral we were told by our parents and the priests that you should only look glum. That's not what Christ said. It's not what St. Paul says. It's not what Jeremiah says. We're like Bartimaeus. We have both the sight and the insight to know who Christ is for us in a personal relationship of liberating love. And we want to go out now and communicate that to all we meet. Sometimes I have parents and grandparents, these days great-grandparents, who say, "Father, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, they don't go to Mass anymore. What am I going to do?" Well, we've been telling them they're going to hell for eternity for the last 35 years, and that doesn't seem to be working. So let's let that one go, and let's try something new. Let's walk out these doors this day and be the most transparently loving, joyful, and peaceful person we can possibly be. And maybe that would encourage them to see what's the source of that love, what's the source of that joy, what's the source of that peace. For all I know is if we really, truly believe that Christ's personal love has saved us and saved all, and we celebrate that here every single Sunday, if that doesn't put a spring in your step, I don't know what's going to. So let's go with joy. Let's go with love and energy. But for Christ's sake, let's get going.